Girls, did you ever have a guy that you wish you said yes to when he asked you out? What's the story? In fourth grade, a boy passed me a note asking whether I'd be his girlfriend. Circle yes or no. I was caught off guard, but my friend sitting next to me wasn't. I believe she said, "Ew, rip it up." And I did. He was a nice kid. I should have circled yes. And I really shouldn't have ripped it up, but that was very rude of me. I'm sorry, Jeremy. Yeah, that would tear any person's heart apart, especially if they're just a young old little kiddo. I hope Jeremy stayed strong. Pretty sure he did. Story 2. I had a guy ask me out in high school, a really fun guy, very nice, funny, athletic, smart, and good looking. I turned him down because I knew he had already had intimacy and I wasn't ready to have it at that time. It wasn't about his morals. I did desperately want to date him, but I just felt like I would never be able to make him happy, and I was embarrassed that I hadn't had intimacy. A few years later in college, I ran into him when I was home on break. He's still the perfect guy, hasn't changed a bit. I screwed the pooch on that one. Story 3. I had a very close friend in high school who really liked me for years. I was his prom date and all, but when he started to want to be more than friends, I was really hesitant, so I said no and distanced myself, even though I knew I should have said yes. Long story short, I'm Sikh and was rebelling against my parents' wishes to be with a practicing Sikh. Such a stupid reason. We stayed friends though. In college, I started to like him even more, but we both had SOs. I kept thinking of telling him how I felt, but I kept these feelings in my head all throughout college without saying anything, and instead stayed with my of a SO. And then when I was getting close to admitting everything to him, he passed away while on vacation with his family. Story 4. Well, I met a beautiful Italian architect when I was studying abroad. He kept in touch over Facebook. As soon as I was single again, he sent me a message telling me that he would pay for my flight to Vienna where his parents live. Then we would move to his flat in Paris. I said no. My education was too important. He got married to a gorgeous Russian girl a couple of months later. Their wedding was straight out of a fairy tale. I would make the same decision again, but dang it if I don't wonder what my life would be like now. Story 5. A friend of mine has this cousin who I thought was top tier gorgeous for years. I always told my friend how handsome I thought he was, but I never really spoke to him, and he never paid me much attention, so I figured he wasn't interested. Relatively recently, he broke up with the girl he was dating and spent a while just hanging around me and hitting on me. I'm in a serious relationship, so it wasn't going to happen, and he knew that, but all I could think was, where the heck was this a while back? Totally regret not being able to say yes after that long. Story 6. In high school, I had a huge crush on this guy, but he was one of the popular guys, and, well, I wasn't. But as luck would have it, we sat beside each other in sophomore English, and he must have thought I was pretty funny because he was laughing at my jokes. Fast forward to the end of the year, he and his GF broke up, and after class, we held hands all the way to the bus stop. I was so shy that I bolted when he tried to kiss me. We didn't talk much afterwards. I regret being shy. Story 7. Way back in middle high school, kids didn't really ask kids out, but I did hear that a kid had a crush on me and my response was less than inviting. So nothing ever came of that, naturally. Fast forward 10 years later, and now I find him very attractive, wishing I had been more open to his crush back then. Now he's married and I'm sitting in single girl sweatpants in my apartment. Maybe I'd be in my married girl sweatpants if I hadn't been such a wuss back then. Story 8. At the end of a summer party, this nice guy gave me his number. I was very shy and kept pulling off calling him because I was nervous. Then I got caught up in the excitement of starting my first year at university, and I honestly just forgot about it. Passed him months later in the hallway at university, and he gave me this incredibly wounded puppy dog look and kept walking. I felt terrible. I hadn't thought it was a big deal for him. I now know it's pretty much always a big deal for a guy to work up that kind of courage. Story 9. Right after high school, a guy I used to flirt with asked me out. Before he asked me out, we would always talk and text. I remember him mentioning how he wanted 4 kids and that he likes intimacy to last for hours. But before he asked me out, I was already talking to someone, an older guy. He had no job, divorced, 2 kids, no car, and lived at home. The high school guy knew I was talking to the older guy, but since I wasn't committed yet, he figured he'd ask. I told him no, because I remembered that he wanted 4 kids and intimacy to last forever. Such stupid reasons to not date anyone. I chose the older guy instead. We reconnected after he returned home from deployment 3 years later. I was single, as was he. We had intimacy, and it only lasted 10 minutes, hung out a lot, and just enjoyed each other. He had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, so when I brought up dating him, he had said no. Fast forward to now, we still talk here and there. He is stationed a state away, and every single day I think about him. I regret everything. I regret choosing my ex over him. I hate myself for doing that. I think he was the one too. Story 10. I had a girl in my third grade class call me over to her side of the classroom. I got up and went over to where her and her friends were sitting. She then asked me if I wanted to be her boyfriend in front of her friends. My eyes got wide and I think I stuttered a yes. She then starts laughing and says, "Just kidding," and all of her friends started cackling. I shrugged and said, "Oh, okay." Went back to my seat and sat down with my arms crossed on my desk and my head buried between them. I was so humiliated I didn't want to see anyone looking at me since the whole class heard. Sigh. Screw you, Lindsay. Story 11. Yes, when I was in college, I had a FWB who went to the university in the same town who I had a really great time with. I was very into just casual at the time, so when I started to feel like we could be more, I broke it off. He was quirky and he was nerdy and adorable and smart. He was goofy and I wasn't comfortable with my goofiness at that point in my life. He was also shorter than I am, and that was a big no-no back then, too. But I wish I could have another chance. He was quirky and nerdy and adorable and goofy and smart, all the things I want now. I'm more comfortable with who I am, and I'm no longer interested in casual. At the very least, I regret that I didn't break things off well or naturally. If I could find him now, I would, and I would beg for another chance. Story 12. I was depressed and convinced I was an awful, hideously ugly person, so I was a loner and I usually sat alone to read a book at lunch. One day, I noticed a kid I was in a few classes with sitting across the quad talking with his friends. They kept glancing at me and quickly looking away again. Eventually, he walked over and asked me out. I thought this must be some awful joke. Why would cute, awesome him want to date terribly ugly me? So I turned him down, and he actually looked kind of disappointed, because he was really committed to the joke. Story 13. No one who asked me out is someone I wish I'd said yes to, but I still regret not sleeping with that one guy that one night. He was absolutely stunning, easily the most beautiful man who had ever paid me any attention whatsoever up to that point. But he did the whole, let's wait, I want this to turn into something thing, so I clamped my legs shut and waited for him to love me. He did the fade 2 weeks later and went back to an ex whom he eventually married, had children with, and divorced. If I'd known I'd never stood a chance in the first place, I would have gone ahead and insisted on something. He was sensual and amazing, and I have no doubt it would have been mind-blowingly good. I still regret that, and it's been 20 years. Damn it, Elle. Story 14. I worked in a library for a while where you were required to wear name tags that somehow represented your real name. I didn't feel comfortable with my first name, so I put my middle name on it. I talked to a really nice guy for about an hour and recommended a bunch of books to him. He came in a week later to ask if middle name was working. The lady at the circulation desk told him that no one by that name worked there. I never saw him again. He seemed like a really great guy, too. He never asked my name, and I never asked him that first day. He probably thought I had lied to him. Story 15. I went to Catholic school growing up, and it was awful. I got picked on a lot in high school. There was this guy I had the biggest crush on since like freshman year. Anyways, after sophomore year, I ended up switching to public school. Fast forward 3 more years. And I was visiting a mutual friend that went to the same college as him, and we all ended up going on a camping trip. Long story short, I had him in my car wanting to have intimacy, and I said no because I was on a break from a stupid boyfriend that I shouldn't have been dating in the first place. I saw him recently, and he's hotter than ever. Story 16. I had a friend that I worked with. After a few months of working together, he asked me out, to which I declined. He was quite a bit older than me and had a kid that was slightly younger than me as well. I felt it would have been weird. Well, he kept persisting, so I went out with him once. After it, I told him I couldn't handle the age difference, but he kept asking anyway. I kept blowing off his let's hang out, thinking that he would take it as a date and not two friends hanging out. I'd made plans once as friends and he took them as date plans and everything. I was as clear as with him as I could be. I blew him off one last time before I had to go work out of town for the weekend. Got a text my first day out of town that he had ended himself. I can't help but think, if I didn't blow him off, would he still be alive? No telling now. Story 17. Yes, back in sophomore year of high school, there was a guy that I had a few classes with and I had a huge crush on him. We had so much in common and always had a good time in each other's company. The only problem was my best friend had a crush on him too, but she didn't know that I liked him. She was always talking about him and envisioning scenarios where they ended up together and even asked me to ask him if he liked her. Yes, very elementary school, but I did it. He said no, so I broke the news to her gently. I made something up about him saying he didn't know her well enough since they had no classes together. A couple weeks later, I was sitting in the school courtyard with another friend, and that guy came up to me and asked me out. I was jumping for joy on the inside, but on the outside, I played it cool and said that I only think of him as a friend. I decided I couldn't hurt my best friend like that. I couldn't go out with the guy she was obsessed with, even if it meant I would be giving up a chance with him. It would have totally broken her heart, and to this day, almost 12 years later, she doesn't know about him asking me out. It's crazy because every now and then this guy pops up in random dreams of mine, and I wake up with a smile on my face and wonder what could have been. But even though I have those thoughts, overall, I think I made the best decision, though. Sigh. Story 18. A coworker asked me out, and I went on about 2 dates with him. I found out how crazy his recent ex was, so I told him I couldn't see him anymore. I didn't want to deal with the drama or fear for my life. About 2 weeks went by, and he texted me saying something like, "What if you show up at a restaurant and I happen to be there at the same time and we just ran into each other? Then it's not really like a date." I thought his persistence was cute, so I went on another date with him. After that last date, I didn't care anymore about his ex, and any storm I would have to deal with was worth it to be with him. Now we're married and have our first child. I don't know if I would have regretted sticking with staying no because I wouldn't have known what I was missing, but I'm really, really glad I didn't. Story 19. This one time I said yes to this really sweet guy that I had been friends with for some time. I really liked him and I could tell he really liked me too. However, 17-year-old me had just broken up with my first ever boyfriend that I had been with for 2 years. My lying, cheating, piece of crap ex boyfriend kept coming around, and I wasn't sure I was 100% over him. Didn't feel like it was fair to the new guy, so I broke it off. He was deaf, and even though he had hearing aids, he mostly read lips. So, because I didn't think I could actually look him in the eyes when I told him, I wrote him a letter. I watched him read it, and he just got up and walked out of my house with tears in his eyes. I never saw him again. I've regretted it ever since, and this was like over 10 years ago. Seriously, one of the biggest regrets of my life was breaking things off with him, but even bigger was never being able to tell him how much I regret it. If you're out there somewhere, I hope you found a girl that's good to you, and I hope your life is amazing. I messed up, Gilbert. I'm sorry. Story 20. Actually, a guy here, but I have a story. There was this adorable punker girl I knew in high school around 1999. I had slowly gotten to know her, and I remember one night we were hanging at a party talking about music. She actually seemed a little into me, and I ended up getting her number. I started talking to her a little, but mainly messaging online. I made 3 separate dates with her, and she would flake every single time at the last second. Eventually, I just stopped trying. Sometime later, she had actually started seeing a friend of mine. One night, I had a party at my house, and I was outside with her having a cigarette. And she started talking about the time I was talking to her at that party and how much she wanted me, blah, 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 blah. Then she said, "I wanted to go out with you so much. When you started talking about Goldfinger, I had trouble controlling myself. Why did you never take me out?" I was stunned and informed her that she flaked on me 3 times. She responded, "Well, if you ever ask me again, I promise I won't," even though she was dating my friend. I wasn't exactly going to backstab my friend, even though I was horribly infatuated with her. This is one of many instances that completely messed me up for asking girls out. High school girls are confusing. Probably a year later, at age 17, she got into a car accident and passed away. 14 years later, I still think about her all the time. Story 21. A couple years ago, I worked as a cashier seasonally to get by because my husband was unemployed. Another of the cashiers was this devastatingly handsome guy. I nicknamed him Dark Legolas when talking about him to my friend because he was beautiful and had this dark mane of hair. He was kind to everyone. He would smile at me all the time and sometimes wink. He liked video games. I'm a huge gamer and was pagan, so am I. In contrast, my home life sucked. My husband was inattentive, emotionally and verbally cruel. I had to call him to work because he wouldn't watch our infant and toddler. I'd come home and they hadn't been changed or fed all day. He was on antidepressants, so his was gone and he hadn't had so much as touched me in months. So basically, my marriage was awful, and here was a breathtakingly handsome guy who smiled at me. I did not emotionally cheat, but I did develop a crush. I knew it was inappropriate, so I kept my distance because I knew if we became friends, I would develop feelings. During my last month at the store, my MIL offered to host my husband and kids for the week of my birthday. He could relax while she watched the kids, and I would have the house to myself for a week. I was talking in the break room at work about my awesome plans to watch Netflix and play video games all week. After the others had left, Legolas came over to me and invited himself over. I'm not the brightest bulb for social cues, but I fully got what he meant when he verified I would be alone and he said, "To keep you company and celebrate your birthday," with a wink and a smile. No one would have known. The seasonal job was ending in a couple of weeks and I wouldn't see my coworkers again. My husband would be out of town. My friends hated my husband and wouldn't care. I declined, and then when I left the job and Legolas extended friendship, I faded away. It didn't matter that I was miserable and mistreated and unsatisfied. I made vows and put a ring on, and I'm not that kind of person to dishonor vows and promises. I'm a loyal, faithful person. It was the perfect temptation, and I don't know if turning him down really makes me a better person. I'm still with my husband, and he is still a horrible schmuck to me. Sometimes when I feel really low and lonely, I regret saying no. I would have had something kind and sexy and fun to look back on. I'm sure in the long run, being a good person was the better choice. Story 22. This guy I worked with and I really hit it off. He was smart and successful. Everyone looked up to him. We were good friends and it was clear we both wanted to take it further. Only problem was I was scared of being in a serious relationship, and I knew that if we started going out, he would be perfect and I'd want to marry him. I wasn't really ready for that. I said no. He stepped back, utterly confused. Next time we saw each other was 6 months later. He had already started going out with another girl, and they've been together ever since. I guess sometimes you gotta risk it for the biscuit, my friend. Story 23. I had the opposite happen. I asked a guy out when I was like 14, and he said no to me for 7 years. For 7 years, every so often, I'd flirt like crazy and then ask him out, and he just shrugged. No, just no. Now, some details. I only ever saw him maybe 1 to 2 times a year during school because, and this is extremely relevant, he was starting college around the time I met him. Now, I was 14, I was a little kid, but I was smitten, and he, as an 18-year-old, already had a reputation for being a ladies' man. I remember when I was asking some mutual friends about him, this kid, Jen, said, "Don't pay any attention to Guy. He thinks he's God's gift to girls." And I, being the obnoxious little punk that I was, answered back, "He isn't? He looks like he might be." So yeah, whenever I saw this kid for 7 years, I'd get all flushed and blushy and stupid, and for 7 years, he just dodged my interest and it just rolled off of him. I won though. In the end, I got him. Well, I had aged out of the creepy age difference, untouchable situation, and had grown into quite the adorable 20-year-old, and he was a completely stunning 24-year-old. Story 24. Yes, a friend of mine asked me out, and I was completely taken by surprise. Without thinking, I declined. Nothing at all changed about our relationship, and he continued to be just as kind as he always was. Fortunately, I had a rare moment of good sense. A few weeks later, I swallowed my pride and asked him if he was still interested. He said yes. Now we're a few years into the thing, and every once in a while I get teased for it almost not happening. And if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 25. Right before I started university, I went on a date with a guy from my high school. He was also going to the same uni. We hit it off and hung out again, but when I got to school, I was so distracted by all the new people and possibilities that I blew him off. I regretted it after the initial buzz of year one passed and started trying to get things going again. It was evident that he wasn't exactly ready to jump back into my arms, lol. I kept trying for almost 2 years, on and off, intoxicated and sober. After a while, I was worried that I had missed my chance, but he opened back up and we started dating. And we've been dating for give or take 2 years now. Story 26. Way back when we had our very first school dance in middle school, this guy asked me to go with him. It was nice and polite, but I had plans to go with my friends, so I told him I'd dance with him there. He asked me to every school dance we had, and I always said no, that I'd dance with him there. I just didn't think he was my quote-unquote type. Sophomore year of high school, I started to get a crush on him, but I'd said no so many times I was afraid he would never ask me again. He did. And we've been together for 8 years and married for one. Happy every day that he kept asking and that I said yes. I guess looks like playing hard to get actually worked in her favor this time. Story 27. Guy here. I need to get this off my chest. I was very shy and an insecure boy. I had obsessions about girls but wouldn't really talk that much to them. I was 15 or something when at the end of the year we were having a chat among friends, boys and girls. One girl asked me if I fancy someone in the class. I refused to say who. She eventually tells me, "Well, I do know someone who fancies you." Then she reveals who that is. The girl in question is right here. I was completely taken aback because I didn't expect her at all. The girl proceeds to speak to me and tells me something along the lines of, if I didn't have to go to another city next year, I would have indeed asked you out. The answer that I came up with was, and I would have said no. To this day, still haunts me, and I'm still trying 10 years later to find her online to get to apologize. Because, well, that was super harsh. I'm a very sensible guy, and I actually have never said anything worse than that in my entire life. She was actually stunning, gorgeous, definitely a lot more than the one I was fond of, for no other reasons than some teenager fantasy based on nothing. I'm sorry, Maggie. Story 28. I was in 8th grade and out roller skating with my mother and my best friend. Couple skate, come on. The three of us went to go sit down. A cute boy asked me to skate with him. If I remember correctly, he said he thought I was pretty, and if I would like to skate with him. He was really polite. I never really had anyone ask me out or compliment me. I was completely caught off guard. I always thought my best friend was much more attractive than me and was confused why he didn't ask her. Flustered, embarrassed for no reason, scared that we would have to hold hands, and terrified that I'd fall down, so I said no. My mother asked me why I said no after he skated away, and I just sort of shrugged. I really regret it and felt really bad afterwards. It must have taken a lot of courage to come up to some random person sitting with her mother and another girl and ask for a couple skate, and I was too afraid to say yes. I still think about it a lot for no reason, 18 years later. Story 29. After I broke up with my boyfriend of 3 years, I had just started community college. I made a guy friend in an art class I took, and we had a lot in common. He was really shy and withdrawn, and at the time, I was a little bit more extroverted. Well, he walked me to my car one day and asked me if I was dating anyone. I said no, and he asked me if we could date. He was super nervous, and I told him the truth. I had just gotten out of a serious relationship and didn't want to date anybody for risk that they'd become a rebound. Less than a month later, I started dating an old friend, and when he came to visit me at school, a shy kid saw us and stopped talking to me. My old friend and I had one of the least healthy relationships I've ever had, and I turned into an introvert and lost all my friends because of him. Now, I'm with a lovely guy and he's awesome, but I'll always regret saying I'm not ready for the good guy and dating the bad one instead. Story 30. I met a guy through a friend of a friend type of suggestion on Facebook. We talked for about a month. We were both into the same stuff. We both had the same dog training mentor. He volunteered at the hospital in his hometown. I volunteered at mine, reading the same books, etc. And a friend convinced me that he was some creep and was going to take me. And another friend told me how awful and sad it was that I couldn't meet someone in real life, and you can't bring a guy you met online to your parents, so I never said yes. Sometimes I wonder about him, though. Story 31. Yes, to a boy in high school. I knew he liked me, but I wasn't into him and didn't think we would be a good match at all. He wasn't a bad person at all, just not someone I had found very interesting the few times we talked. So when he called and asked me out, I said no thank you as politely as I knew how, and pretty much tried to avoid him for a while after that because I didn't want to have to turn him down again. Yet now I wish that I'd gone out with him just once and given it a chance. Like, what would it hurt? It took him a lot of courage to pick up the phone that day and call me. That has to count for something. And I was already a social pariah, and the guy I had been crushing on didn't even know I was alive. So it's not like I had a reputation to protect or other suitors knocking on my door. One round of mini golf wouldn't have made a difference in the grand scheme of things, and if it didn't work out after that, well, then at least I could have made a decision based on actual data. And perhaps it would have helped him as well, since he could have moved on to someone else instead of holding out hope that I'd give him a chance, which he did for another year or so. Story 32. I hope I'm not too late. I think I briefly shared this in another comment, so here is the full version. First year of college, I met this guy in English class. We were to exchange rough drafts of an essay with a classmate to read over and critique. The essays were about a personal experience that changed you in some way. I wrote about the passing of my grandfather, and he wrote about his experience in Afghanistan when an IED went off that injured him as well as others. His was very well written, and I don't remember finding any issues in his essay, so after he critiqued mine, we just started chatting until everyone else was done and the professor told us to stop. We clicked quite well, and we chatted some more after class. Then in the next class, we continued talking before and after, and he asked for my number. I gave it to him and thought, wow, I really like this guy. I wonder if he likes me too. I was quite clueless as to guys hitting on me and being into me at this time in my life. That coming weekend, he invited me to trivia night with his friends at a place by campus. At the time, I remember having a project I had procrastinated on that was due Monday, so I told him that. We still chatted for a while, and then he invited me to a Halloween party. Well, everyone I knew had plans, and no one wanted to go with me, and I didn't want to go without a friend in case I drank, so I didn't go. Instead, I hung out with a friend at another party. After that, he didn't talk to me anymore, and at the same time, I had no idea why, and I didn't make an effort to talk to him, so that was that. He was a really nice guy, and I liked him, but I can see how it looked as though I wasn't into him from his perspective. After figuring out he was into me too, and I was an idiot, I changed and started making moves on guys I liked, or I just made it clear I was into them. Wherever you are, guy from English 101, I hope you found a wonderful lady who wasn't clueless. Story 33. In high school, I was friends with a guy named Alex. He was sweet and smart, and I genuinely cared a lot about him. He was always quiet and didn't talk much, but I always tried to include him in things because he was such a great guy, but just a little shy. I also had a boyfriend at the time who was completely obsessive over me. If I tried to break up with him, he would just follow me everywhere I went and constantly beg me to come back to him. Well, one time I had broken up with him and we stayed apart for a while. During that time, Alex became my study partner and we met at the library to do projects together. He even brought his Xbox one day for me to borrow for over a week. That's when you know a guy really likes you. Well, one evening we were talking on MSN Messenger, old school I know, and he started sending me hearts, hugs, and kisses. This was the first time that he had remotely expressed his feelings for me. I thought about it the entire weekend and decided that if we dated, we would eventually break up and then our friendship would be ruined. So I chose to get back with my obsessive ex instead. When we went back to school and he saw that we were back together, it obviously ruined our friendship anyway. I know it sounds stupid, but in my teenage mind, I was doing it because I actually liked him so much that I was afraid of losing him. Weeks later, I realized how stupid that was. I regretted it, but I felt like it was already too late, so I didn't even try. Then, years later, I realized how stupid I was to not try. And by that time, I was newly married and he was in Afghanistan. I did talk to him a few times as friends, and I even sent him a birthday card to Afghanistan. But sometimes I wonder if things would have been different or if he would have just broken up and stopped being friends like I originally thought. Story 34. Didn't quite say no, but I had my first serious relationship with a sweet boy I met in nerd camp in high school. We dated through college and were together for 5 years before he graduated and moved across the country. We tried the distance thing for a year while we were apart, but his job made him extraordinarily busy and it was difficult. Guess this is where I screw up. I was getting a lot of attention back in college and started to get curious what it'd be like to date someone else. It was the only serious relationship I'd ever had. I used the excuse that distance wasn't working and I didn't know if I wanted to end up where he was. I caught him by surprise and we split. He tried to fix things a few weeks later, but I thought I was making the right decision. I later found out from mutual friends that he found out the real reason and took it really hard. Fast forward 3 years, my excuse turns out to be stupid since I moved to the same city immediately after college since my ex-BF had helped me find the best opportunity I had before we split, which of course was in his town. I've missed him for the past 2.75 years. He was a perfect man and I completely messed up and ruined it. We still catch up every few months and I still can't get over him, but after what I put him through, I understand why he's not willing to get back together with me. But it's so god darn tempting, especially since he hasn't had a serious relationship since. Story 35. I'm late, but this is my one regret of my school life, so meh. We were at the gym in 8th grade, walking and running on the track outside. I was walking slowly, and a group of 5 guys were walking behind me. They were whispering and snickering behind me, but I wasn't paying them any attention. Then one of the louder guys, who I also never got on well with, calls out to me, "Hey, I dreamed this. Would you go out with Hispanic?" Their nickname for the guy in question, don't ask. I was completely taken aback, especially since I'd never been asked out before. I looked the potential dater in the eye and said with finality, no. He looked immediately crushed, to which I felt guilty for, but rationalized that if he worked up the courage to ask me himself, I'd say yes. His friends cackled, and the one who called out to me said, "He totally wants to sleep with you," followed by several more rude comments before I hit them all a glare and up and jogged away. The guy was really withdrawn, and I had barely any contact with him. A week later, he changed schools, and I never saw him again. He was a nice, friendly guy who I totally crushed at that age, which can be scary. I was never asked out again in high school, probably because I got a reputation for being mean, intimidating, or a lesbian. And now, as an adult, I have almost zero dating experience. A lot of my life would have been different now if I had just said yes or even sought him out later. On the very far off chance that Nick or anyone who knows him reads this, I'm sorry, and I hope any girls you met later in life were much kinder than I was. Story 36. I was quoted in some NYC tabloid fluff piece, and they sent a handsome British photographer to take a photo of me for the article. I loved his accent and his style and his tousled dark hair, so I felt incredibly flattered when he nervously asked if I'd go with him to have a coffee. I so wanted to go, but I just moved back in with my long-term on-again, off-again boyfriend, and going on a date with such a charming boy seemed like a crappy thing to do. I told him, I think I should go home. Eventually, I broke up with that terrible boyfriend for good. Years later, I still regret that I dutifully went home to a doomed relationship that night instead of sitting in a diner and getting to know that cute British photographer who was clearly smitten with me. Maybe my life would have gone in an entirely different direction. Story 37. I'm late and this is long, but I'd just like to get it off my chest anyways. A friend and I started flirting a little bit back and forth, but I was just newly out of a long-term relationship and didn't have my head on right at the time. One night, he decided to tag along with me to the bar, knowing full well I was planning on meeting up with some other guy I was having rebound flings with. Of course, he decides that this is the perfect night to really put himself out there. Long story short, I chose the other guy over him at the end of the night, except since he had drank too much to drive home, he ended up coming back to my place with us to spend the night on the couch. It was awkward and embarrassing for both of us. We recovered from this, along with a couple of other mishaps, and were able to remain friends, although we eventually just kind of lost touch. I picked the rebound guy that night, already knowing it wasn't leading to anything meaningful or serious for exactly that reason. And to be honest, I just didn't really think that my friend was my type or that I was his, for that matter. Within the last couple of years, I somehow discovered his Reddit username. I creepily stalked it for a while just to see what he was up to, and I was blown away by how smart, witty, and hilarious he actually is. I just couldn't see it at the time because he is kind of quiet and I was apparently a shallow witch. I am extremely happy in a serious relationship now, and he seems to be as well. But I still sometimes wonder what may have happened if timing had been better. I feel like we may have actually had a real chance. And if you're reading this, I'm sorry, Greg. You are a real catch. Your girlfriend is lucky, and I hope all is well. Story 38. I love this thread. It's good to see that girls mess up too, and now they can see how brutal they can be to us. I'm a dude, but there's no better place to tell my story than this thread. Her name was Nicole. We met on the first day of our nutrition class. She offered me gum when she sat next to me. I was smitten by her continence. We were two workout fiends and had similar other interests. We got to know each other well, and I fell for her pretty hard. I was so in love with her that I never really fantasized about her. I just wanted to be with her. One day, I surprised her with a birthday gift. I was going to make my move then, let her know that though she had a boyfriend, I knew him and he went to the same college. I was crazy about her and sort of left the ball on her court. We went to lunch in the Upper East Side, some Chinese restaurant. I asked her how long she's been seeing this guy. She said 7 years. And we were only like 19 or 20 then. She threw me off with that, and I backed off from telling her how I felt. Some 10 years later, I saw her on the train. I was looking down and heard a voice I recognized. I looked up and saw this beautiful redhead, and I couldn't believe it was her. I was with my wife and an infant, lol. The last time I looked her up online, she had a different last name. That's when all hope vanished. It's been almost 20 years. I'm married with 2 kids, but I still love you, Nicole. You are and always will be perfect to me. I love you. Story 39. Many years ago, I asked a cashier at a grocery store I frequented semi-regularly for her number. We had a decent rapport, and I felt as if she was flirting. She told me she had a boyfriend, and I told her not to sweat it, have a good day, and left. A week or so later, I went back in, and she was the only cashier open, so I went to her line. I started making small talk again, and it didn't seem awkward at all, which was awesome. Everything was back to how it was before I had failed at getting her number. Before I finished, though, she said, I actually don't have a boyfriend, and I really regret not giving you my number, and went to give it to me. I told her not to feel obligated to do so, but she insisted she really wanted to and regretted not. We went on one date, had absolutely no chemistry outside of the confines of grocery store small talk, and I quit going to that grocery store to avoid the awkward tension. Story 40. I've actually never rejected anyone. However, a small part of me wonders if any of the guys who rejected me ever regretted doing so. There was one guy who, right before we started 10th grade, turned me down. I had the absolute biggest crush on him for a couple of years. He was still friendly afterwards, and when he drew my name for a class Valentine assignment, we had to make a card. He went overboard and also handmade a heart-shaped mirror in addition to the requirement, which made me a bit confused. I was never brave enough to ask again, though. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for watching.